Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2025 Self-Advocates of Indiana Statewide Zoom. Today, we're going to be hearing from Sean Fulton about celebrating female leaders in the disability rights movement. I'll hand this over to Sean.
All right. Thank you, Noah. I'm Sean Fulton. I'm the Advocacy, Engagement, and Education Manager for the ARC of Indiana and past Self-Advocates of Indiana president. I'm glad that there's a lot of people on here today, so it's really cool. So we are going to talk about some of the women who changed disability rights. So Alice Wong, the founder and project coordinator of the Disability Visibility Project, works for disabled writers. Oh man, works for Disabled Writer Project to help editors connect with disabled writers and journalists. Advisory board member for Asian and Pacific Islanders with Disabilities of California. Presidential appointee to the National Council of Disabilities and born in Indianapolis, Indiana.
I feel like being Asian American and disabled, and the fact that, I hold these identities as very much part of my political identity. I feel like there's no way to separate those things. My name is Alice Wong. I'm a disabled activist, media maker, and consultant based in San Francisco, and the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project. I was born with my disability. Basically, I grew up as a disabled child in a non-disabled world. And in many ways, I didn't have a choice to be an advocate. Growing up, I really stuck out. I was almost always the one physically disabled kid in the classroom, and almost always one of maybe just a few Asian Americans. I was never in spaces that, reflected me. I just had to learn how to communicate first, just being able to articulate my needs. And I think that was the start of learning how to advocate for myself. Sometimes I had to ask teachers for help. That also made me grow up, and also clearly dealing with others just my age who didn't understand why I couldn't do this or why I couldn't do that. But, I think growing up, there was a lot of internalized self-loathing as an Asian American, also, as a disabled person. So there's a lot to unpack in terms of slowly becoming comfortable in my own skin. Because of the pandemic, because if I got sick, I know I wouldn't survive as somebody that relies on a ventilator. So it is weird, physically isolating, and, I don't feel safe. I think there's a lot of pain in the fact that for hundreds of years, all kinds of Asian folks have been part of America, the American story, the history of America. And the fact that people are suddenly realizing that, anti-Asian sentiments exist and violence exists toward Asian Americans. I think a lot about the murder of Vincent Chin in the 1980s and how that was a catalyst for a lot of Asian American activism. Again, it's marginalized folks are the ones to be activated. I try really hard not to be a unicorn. I don't want to be the unicorn in the disability spaces as one of several Asian Americans, and in Asian American spaces I don't want to be the one disabled person or the one apparently disabled person. Sometimes I still feel like that is still the case, but I hope that there are more of us and that people don't extract our experiences just to educate themselves. It's more about valuing us as who we are. Everybody's on their own journey, and I think to say that I'm an activist, I don't think it's a requirement to be loud and proud, because there should be a lot of different ways to be an advocate, whether it's behind the scenes, stuff just, that people just don't notice, which I think is absolutely just as valid too.
Okay, well, that was an interesting video and something I'd not ever seen before. So that was actually pretty cool to see this for the first time. So then Mary Lou Breslin, co-founder of Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. Dread, is that how, I hope that's how you say that? Is a, huh?
Dread, I believe.
Okay. Is a leading national civil rights law and policy center led by people with IDD. Helped to pass the ADA Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Restoration Act.
One of the most important accomplishments of the civil rights paradigm is that it acknowledged that people with disabilities are discriminated against. Well, I think the first challenge was to make disabled people understand that the issues that they confronted were civil rights issues. For many, many years, for many of us, certainly myself included, we perceived our issues as solitary, as singular, as our own and no one else's. For example, if you use a wheelchair and encounter stairs into a building, sort of ask yourself, what is that problem? And if your answer is, well, you can't walk, that sort of presents the locus of responsibility is within yourself. If your answer to that question is, there's stairs to that building and they should be removed, then you place the obligation outside of the individual. The goal of the disability movement is that people have choice and opportunity, and it doesn't mean your life is easy or that it will be perfect, but that you are not prevented based on disability from participating in doing whatever you want to do. I think it's well understood that both the Americans with Disabilities Act and its predecessor laws call for something completely reasonable, which is if you build something, make it be accessible. This idea leads to the notion of universal design, and in fact, they're beginning to build and design for the broadest number of people, not for people with disabilities, but for everybody, and to take into account that you have little kids and old people and big people and small people and short people and tall people, and that those parameters need to be contained in design principles. And so what was originally considered an accessibility sort of obligation is now morphing into this idea of universality.
Okay, that was pretty cool also. Some of these I haven't never seen, so they're actually really cool to watch them for the first time. So now is Joyce Ardell Jackson. Participated in the 504 sit-ins, occupied the San Francisco regional office of the Department of Education and Welfare for over a month, demanding that Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act be enforced. Was one of the 20 activists sent to DC to meet with President Carter's administration to encourage the enforcement of Section 504. Served on the national board of the American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities.
Happy February 27th, fam. We are just a few days away from the end of Black Disabled History Month, and we'll be talking about a remarkable woman in the disability rights movement. Her name is Joyce Ardell Jackson. As a child, she developed arthritis at age 12, and she had over 50 surgeries. She found strength in her disability, jokingly calling herself the Bionic Woman. Though she may not be as well known as other activists, she was an active participant in the historic 504 sit-ins at the Health, Education, and Welfare Office in San Francisco, California. The purpose of the protest was to finally get the state of California to enforce the landmark civil rights legislation for people with disabilities, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It was an occupation of over 150 disabled protesters, disability rights allies, in a federal building for over 25 days. The Black Panther Party supported the disabled demonstrators by providing meals and other resources. The sit-ins were successful and got California officials to sign regulations enforcing the Rehab Act. Joyce Ardell Jackson also traveled to D.C. to meet with members of President Jimmy Carter's administration to convince the HUE officials to implement Section 504, barring discrimination against people with disabilities. She also worked at the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, California in the 1970s, which was a hub of the disability rights movement. Though she passed away in 2013, we all have benefited from her work, as many of the revolutions in this country have been built on the backs of Black women, and this includes disabled women too. Continue to make Black disabled history. Happy February.
Jennifer Keelan, sorry, I'm butchering names today, joined the disability rights movement at the age of 6. Was arrested at the age of 7 for peacefully protesting in Montreal. Participated in the Capitol crawl at the age of 8, and today she is an educator and motivational speaker.
It's Our Story. Jennifer Keelan, Denver, Colorado.
I remember when we were trying to get the ADA passed, and back in what was it, 1990, or was it 1989 or 1990? And I decided that I wanted to climb the steps of the Washington Capitol, and everybody didn't want me to. It was supposed to be like an all-adult thing, and they're like, no, Jennifer, you're too young, you can't do it. And I turned to Wade Blank and I said, I need to climb the steps. I want to climb the steps. And Wade said, go for it. So I got out of my wheelchair and I started climbing.
Well, the next thing I know, I've got 50 cameras on me, and I've got mics all over me, and it's like the hottest day, the month of March, and I'm just dripping with sweat, and I'm saying to myself, not only am I going to do this for myself, but I'm going to do it for my friend, Kenny, who died a couple of months earlier, and I was going to do it, for the future. And I said, okay, so I'm gonna climb these steps. And I get out of my wheelchair and I start climbing. And all these cameras are on me. I mean, like 50 cameras are on me. And I'm like 8, 9 years old. And I'm going, water, 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 I need water. And 50 bottles of like water, Wendy's cups and water bottles, and I mean, I had international news on me. I had national news on. I had local. I had everybody, and I'm climbing these steps, and it's a big climb. I mean, 82 steps for a 10-year-old. I mean, that's huge, and I've got the little pamphlet in the back of my pocket that we're supposed to hand over to the politicians to get the ADA passed, and I can remember, that once I climbed the steps, I sat down and I'm like, wow, I just did all that. And they say that it was the image of me climbing those steps that, was the final decision to get the ADA passed. And that is one of the most extreme memories that I have that I'm extremely proud of. And I knew at that moment that I was not only representing myself, but I was representing my generation. And if I didn't do it, if somebody my age, didn't do it, then nobody from my generation would be represented. I mean, I had to do it. I had to, and nobody was going to stop me. I mean, everybody was trying to stop me except for Wade. Wade was like, "Go for it!" And so, I took off my belt and I just started climbing, and then all of a sudden, and they're all like, they're all quiet. Normally the news reporters, they're like asking me questions. Well, not this time. They're all quiet. And every time that I asked for water, I said, water. And I had 50 bottles of water, thrown at me and, given to me. And I could just pick from either one. And then I just started, and I mean, they were like literally on me. And that was one of the great moments.
The It's Our Story project is a national effort to make disability history public and accessible.
Okay, cool. So now we have Judy Human. She helped organize the 504 sit-ins, helped develop the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Americans with Disability Act, special advisor on disability rights for multiple U.S. presidents, founding member of the Berkeley Center for Independent Living, co-founder of the World Institute on Disability, known as the Mother of Disability Rights Movement.
For the 1 billion people in the world who live with a disability, life can sometimes be a challenge. But when Judy Human, a disabled teacher from New York, decided she had had enough discrimination, she helped spearhead a new law that changed United States society forever. In 1949, when she was just 18 months old, Human contracted polio, an often deadly disease that left her using a wheelchair for the rest of her life. As a child, she experienced her first taste of discrimination when the principal of her kindergarten refused to let her enter the building on her first day of school, claiming she posed a fire hazard.
Her mother fought for her right to education, and she was eventually enrolled in a public high school, where Human was often bullied by her classmates. But at Camp Gen Ed, a summer camp for children with disabilities, she was able to make new friends and experience an inclusive life. It inspired her to want to change things so that others with disabilities can enjoy the same freedoms as those without. While studying speech therapy at Long Island University, Human led protests calling for improved access. And after graduating, she applied to be a teacher. But the New York Board of Education denied her request for a license, using an excuse she had heard before: she was a fire hazard. So Human sued and won in a settlement out of court, becoming the first teacher in New York to use a wheelchair. Now a pioneer, she threw herself into campaigning for disability civil rights. In 1972, when President Richard Nixon blocked a new law designed to protect those with disabilities, Human organized protests across the country, bringing the streets of New York City to a standstill as dozens of disabled protesters rallied against Nixon's veto. In 1983, she co-founded the World Institute on Disability, a global organization dedicated to improving the lives of disabled people everywhere. But it was the Americans with Disabilities Act which made discrimination based on disability illegal in the U.S. that proved to be her greatest victory. Human went on to serve under 2 presidents. Today, she is recognized as one of the greatest disability rights activists of her generation. Why do you think it's necessary to advocate for disability rights?
But the question is it because one has a disability, or because society itself has constructed itself in such a way because they haven't seen us? Discrimination against disabled people has existed from the beginning of time. And we're in a place right now where, because of other movements, civil rights movement, the women's movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, etc., people are speaking up and out. One of the first pieces of legislation that the disability community really engaged in was getting regulations developed for a provision of law called Section 504. Section 504 says you can't discriminate against someone who has a disability if the entity is receiving money from the federal government. It was the first time that many of these young disabled people felt a part of something and really felt that they were making a difference, not only for their lives, but for the lives of many others. There is a shift, I believe, going on in our society where we're looking at race and gender equality and disability as issues that we need to address, that diversity is something that makes our companies stronger, that diverse businesses provide better services for customers. I also am a very big believer that the disability rights community cannot stand on its own. We need to be working with all other movements, and we want all other movements to be inclusive of disabled people. If we are actively learning and working together, we can do things like make sure when housing is being built in our communities that it's accessible, not just for people who have physical disabilities today, but if you're going to have a physical disability tomorrow. I think having a disability really has allowed me to do and get in touch with so many things and opportunities that otherwise would not have happened. People look at us as the label of our disability. And it is a part of who we are, but it is not who we are. My name is Judy Human, and this is my brief but spectacular take on the disability rights movement.
Hers was a life that made a difference.
Absolutely. She will be missed.
Okay, these are just a few of the many women leaders within the disability movement. We are thankful for their advocacy and work of these and other leaders who have helped to improve the lives of people with disabilities. Thank you for joining us. Now we will stop recording, and the reminder of the hour will be a spent socializing and talking about self-advocacy in our lives.